This week, the House Foreign Affairs Committee learned something quietly remarkable. The Secretary of State spent 5 years chairing Senate Intelligence. The man now running American intelligence is Bill Polt, and the Secretary just said on the record he's never heard of him. Congressman Keating put that on tape. Then he asked about Ukraine. So watch the exchange, and our research team will break down the full analysis at the end. Let's watch the hearing.
Being here, in conjunction with your job, you're also the National Security Advisor with access to the most sensitive intelligence secrets our countries and other countries have in the world. But before this, you had these two positions. You had a distinguished career as a member and a chair for 5 years of the Senate Intelligence Committee up to last year. And you and Senator Warner are some of the most respected and knowledgeable people at that time and voices in the entire intelligence community, earning the trust of Democrats and Republicans alike, Senator and House members, and other countries. So with all your Intelligence Committee experience, and now as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and all those years of experience, have you ever, specifically in the context of the intelligence community, heard the name Bill Pulte?
In the context of intelligence?
That's what I said.
No. No, I have
Never heard his name. Okay, thank you for answering that.
Well,
never even heard his name. Given all your years of experience and your position now, never heard the name. For the record, Bill Pulte is a person Donald Trump has chosen for the acting director of national intelligence with no experience in the intelligence field, whose misuse, widely reported, of confidential information led to the prosecution of the president's political enemies, is now the person in charge of the nation's most closely guarded intelligence when he couldn't even conduct himself appropriately as the federal housing finance director. Now, Secretary, have you ever heard of the name Ira Zahari?
Who's that?
You've never heard the name Ira Zahari?
I mean, it doesn't ring a bell off the top.
In the context of security? Well, let me tell you. Mr. Zahari pleaded guilty for breaking into the Capitol on January 6th through a broken window, wielding a metal rod as a weapon. And Donald Trump appointed him to a team at the Pentagon focused on irregular warfare and, of all things, counterterrorism. That's ironic, given that he participated in one of the most significant incidents of domestic terror in our country's history. I think it's shameful, the people that are being appointed, and I think it's also shameful some of the people that have been fired. Now, I want to move to Iran because given your nuclear and intelligence background, which is extensive and appreciated and respected, I'm sure you're aware that Ukraine, the country at the time with the third largest nuclear arsenal, peacefully turned over their nuclear weapons in conjunction with the Budapest Memorandum and in exchange for the U.S. commitment to defend Ukraine if it ever came under threat. The U.S. gave their word to Ukraine they would defend them. And I found this amazing. In your opening remarks, as you took us all over the world, and you mentioned 15 different incidents where you have interceded, 15, the top 15. Not once did you mention Ukraine when you were prioritizing the achievement that's there. Now let me go on.
Try to stay under 5
Let me
minutes.
go on. Oh, you tried to stay, yeah, please.
Well, I
It's
can
not
answer
funny.
that.
It's not funny, Secretary. Now,
What's not funny
in
is
Iran
that-
now,
Well, you don't.
in
this is-
Iran
you
now,
can't even
I
answer
reclaim
questions
my
here.
time. I reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
You
He's
guys make
interrupting
these
me.
statements and no
he
one can
is
respond.
interrupting me. Do something about it. I'm doing it. I'm asking you to reclaim those seconds back.
No.
Now in Iran, what goes around comes around, Mr. Chairman. Now in Iran, the Trump administration issues a general license to Russia, providing billions in oil profits every month, several billion every month, fueling Putin's war machine. You didn't mention that in your opening remarks. And then this is a war of aggression of Russia attacking Ukraine, which we gave in our agreement. And this is to a country that's assisting us in Iran, Ukraine, and helping a country with a war machine that are aiding Iran against us and putting our service members in jeopardy. Look, we have an opportunity as members just today to vote on the Ukraine Support Act. I hope we do it, and I am confident that we have bipartisan support. But I hope this administration will act on its own. They could do things themselves. that you didn't mention, like rescind these general licenses, complete a bilateral drone agreement with Ukraine, provide direct military assistance it has access to Ukraine, implement comprehensive sanctions packages,
Representative's
and condemn
time has
the
expired.
arrest.
Representative
Thank you,
Smith
Mr.
of New
Chairman,
Jersey
for taking
is
up
recognized.
my time and squandering it. That's not how it
What made this exchange land was its lineage. Congressman William Keating did not start with a policy disagreement. He started with a question about credentials. Who, in this administration, is being placed in positions of significant national security trust, and what are their actual qualifications? Keating used his time to walk the secretary through specific names and specific appointments. He then linked those appointments to a larger argument about whether the most sensitive intelligence and most consequential foreign policy decisions are being run through the people best equipped to handle them. That framing is unusual for a foreign affairs hearing. It is also why the exchange landed harder than a standard policy fight. Personnel choices are decisions on the public record. They reveal priorities. Keating opened by setting the bar. He reminded the room that the Secretary of State and current acting National Security Advisor had previously chaired the Senate Intelligence Committee for 5 years. That is a real credential. Senate Intelligence is one of the most consequential committees in the Congress. The chair has access to nearly every closely guarded intelligence stream in the United States government. Keating noted that Rubio and Senator Warner were widely considered among the most respected voices in the intelligence community, trusted across party lines. That opening was not flattery. It was a deliberate setup. By acknowledging Rubio's qualifications first, Keating made the contrast with the next two names sharper. The reference point was a serious one. Now compare. Keating then asked his first specific question. Given the Secretary's years on Senate intelligence and his current acting position as National Security Advisor, had he ever heard of a person named Bill Pult in any intelligence context? The Secretary answered no. He said he had never heard the name. That answer is significant. It comes from the man who, until recently, sat at the apex of bipartisan intelligence oversight in the United States Senate. If a person now being nominated for acting director of national intelligence had not crossed his radar in 5 years, that says something specific about how the person arrived at the appointment. It does not mean Pult is unqualified. It does mean the path to the appointment is unusual. Keating then added context to the record. Bill Pult, according to his framing, has no background in the intelligence field. He had been serving as the Federal Housing Finance Director, where, in Keating's words, there were widely reported issues with the misuse of confidential information used to advance the prosecution of the president's political opponents. Keating was careful with the language. He was characterizing public reporting, not asserting a legal conclusion. But the point was clear. The person now being placed in charge of the nation's most closely guarded intelligence was, on Keating's account, someone who had already produced a public controversy about how confidential information gets used. That is exactly the question that intelligence community oversight is supposed to surface. Keating moved to a second name, Ira Zahari. Again, the secretary said the name did not ring a bell. Keating then provided the context. According to him, Mr. Zahari pleaded guilty to breaking into the Capitol on January 6 through a broken window, wielding a metal rod. He has now been appointed to a Pentagon team focused on irregular warfare and counterterrorism. Keating did not editorialize beyond noting the obvious irony. A person convicted in connection with one of the most significant incidents of domestic terror in American history is now part of the federal counterterrorism apparatus. That is a remarkable fact pattern. It is also a fact pattern that, in any prior administration, would have produced a sustained internal review. Keating was making sure the public record reflects what is happening now. Take a step back. The first half of the Keating exchange was about two specific people in two specific positions. It was not about an abstract personnel debate. It was about whether the system is being staffed in a way that future Americans will be glad to inherit. The Bill Pult appointment in Keating's framing raises a credentials question. The Ira Zahari appointment in Keating's framing raises a judgment question. Personnel decisions are policy. They tell every analyst in the building what is rewarded. They tell every external partner what to expect. They tell foreign intelligence services what kind of bench they are now dealing with on the American side. Keating put both names in the record at the same hearing. The two are now linked in the historical archive. Keating then pivoted to substance. He observed something specific about the Secretary's own opening statement. The secretary had walked the committee through 15 different international priorities the State Department had been engaged in. Not once in that list of 15 did the secretary mention Ukraine. That omission was Keating's hinge. Ukraine is not a small file. It is one of the largest ongoing security commitments the United States has carried in the past 3 decades. To not mention it in a list of 15 priorities is a choice. Keating wanted that choice on the record before he moved into the policy section of his time. The record now reflects that the Secretary's listed priorities in his own statement did not include the largest ongoing land war in Europe. Keating then introduced one of the most important pieces of historical context in the entire hearing. He reminded the room that Ukraine, the country with the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world at the time, peacefully turned over its nuclear weapons under the Budapest Memorandum. In exchange, the United States committed to defending Ukraine if it ever came under threat. That commitment is not abstract. It is the foundation of one of the few historical examples of successful nuclear nonproliferation through diplomatic agreement. If the United States now treats that commitment as discretionary, it sends a signal to every other country considering a similar trade. Give up your weapons. Take the American word. See what it is worth a generation later. Keating made that signal explicit on the record. Keating then introduced the most pointed policy fact of the exchange. He said that the Trump administration had issued a general license to Russia that allowed billions of dollars in oil profits to continue flowing every month. He attributed those revenues to fueling Putin's war machine in Ukraine. Whether the framing of every detail is contested or not, the underlying claim is concrete. Sanctions regimes contain license carve-outs. Those carve-outs are policy decisions. They can be measured. They can be challenged. If the United States is on one hand maintaining the Budapest Memorandum commitment to Ukraine and on the other hand allowing significant Russian oil revenue to continue, those two positions sit in tension. Keating wanted that tension on the record before the hearing closed. The hearing chair tried to intervene, the secretary tried to respond. Keating reclaimed his time. There was visible friction in the room. That friction is part of what made the exchange land. When a member is doing methodical oversight work, with specific names and specific dates, the temptation for the witness and the chair is to break the rhythm. Reclaiming time is the standard parliamentary tool for resisting that break. Keating used it. The exchange did not stay friendly. It also did not lose its structure. That is exactly the kind of congressional time use that reads well in transcripts a decade from now. The friction itself is a sign that the questions were landing. There is a reason congressional oversight repeatedly returns to personnel. Personnel choices last longer than press releases. They survive turnovers. They populate the bench that subsequent administrations either keep or remove. They define which experts are on speed dial during a crisis. By focusing on two specific appointments, Keating was performing the kind of oversight that durably shapes how a country is governed. Policies can be reversed in a day. Personnel decisions persist through promotion cycles, security clearance reviews, and institutional memory. The Pult and Zahari references will be examined by future committees. That is the point. The names are now permanent in the record. Keating's questions land differently because of who was in the room. The secretary spent 5 years chairing Senate Intelligence. The people who staffed that committee, the analysts who briefed it, the cleared officers who supported it, are watching this exchange. When Keating asks if a Senate Intelligence chair had never heard of a particular nominee, the audience for that question includes the entire serious intelligence community. They know what it means for someone to come up through that system. They know what it means for someone not to. Keating was not just speaking to the secretary. He was speaking through the secretary to the institutional memory of an entire community of professionals. The record will reach them whether they watched live or not. The Ukraine portion of the exchange will not stay in this hearing. It will be revisited. The Budapest Memorandum has been the subject of academic analysis, diplomatic recommitments, and policy debate for 30 years. Adding a fresh congressional reference to it by a senior member of the relevant committee in a foreign affairs hearing during a live war reactivates the policy conversation. Other members in both chambers will now cite this exchange. Foreign embassies will cite it. The Ukrainian government will cite it. The point of the congressional record is not the day it is written, it is the day it is referenced. Keating's framing of Budapest in this hearing will be referenced for years. The follow-up reporting and oversight work on this exchange will likely focus on two streams. First, the formal documentation around the Russian oil general license. Sanctions adjustments are administrative actions. They have memoranda, they have legal opinions, they have signing officials. Second, the clearance review history for the named appointees. Federal background investigations are documented processes, they have findings, they have determinations. They have records that congressional oversight can request. Whether or not the secretary answered in real time, both of those document streams will be available for serious investigative work. The hearing put the questions on the record. The documents will eventually answer them. Step back from the partisan layer and look at what was actually covered in a single 5-minute window. One member of Congress raised, with documentation, the question of who is running American intelligence. He raised, with documentation, the question of whether a person convicted in connection with January 6th now sits inside the counterterrorism apparatus. He raised the question of whether the United States is honoring its core nonproliferation commitment to Ukraine. He raised the question of whether sanctions carve-outs are allowing significant Russian oil revenue during an ongoing war. That is an unusually dense use of 5 minutes. It is also the kind of density that turns a hearing exchange into a reference point for serious analysis later. There are 2 markers worth watching after this hearing. The first is whether the House Foreign Affairs Committee follows up with a formal request for the documentation around the Russian oil general license. The second is whether oversight inquiries are filed concerning the security clearance history of the appointees Keating named. Both of those threads can move quietly, through written correspondence, without producing the kind of public theater that the cable news cycle rewards. They will, however, produce documents. Documents are durable, documents settle disputes. The future of this exchange will live in those documents. There is a broader governance lesson underneath all of this. Public trust in national security institutions is not built by speeches. It is built by the daily reality of who sits in the seats, who has the clearance, who attends the meeting, who signs the memo, who debriefs the president. Every one of those slots is a decision that says something about what the country expects from the people protecting it. When a member of Congress with serious credentials walks the room through specific names and specific appointments, that member is performing the kind of work that keeps institutions trustworthy. Whether or not the administration agrees with the framing, the work matters. It is one of the few corrective mechanisms a democracy has. Give the secretary his due. He was not in the room to defend specific appointments outside his own department. He has limited authority over personnel decisions in agencies he does not lead. His answers were short in part because the questions were not strictly inside his lane. That is a fair limitation. At the same time, the questions were not random. They were tied directly to the intelligence community, which was the secretary's own previous oversight portfolio. So the limitation is real and the relevance is also real. Both sides did what they came to do. Keating raised facts that the public should know. The secretary protected the prerogatives of his current role. Neither side conceded. The record holds both. Step further back. Hearing transcripts are part of the permanent archive of how a country governs itself. They are read by historians, by lawyers, by future officials, by journalists writing post-mortems. What gets entered into that archive matters more than the news segment that follows the hearing. By placing the Pult question, the Zahari appointment, the Budapest commitment, and the Russian oil license into a single 5-minute congressional exchange, Keating turned a difficult oversight task into a structured archival record. Decades from now, when researchers reconstruct how the United States handled this period, that transcript will be a primary document. That is the highest use of the format. So the final accountability question is the one Keating pushed throughout. What was gained, what was lost, and who is paying the cost? If the gain is a fresh approach to intelligence community staffing that delivers measurable results, a foreign assistance posture that produces better outcomes for American interests, and a Russia policy that genuinely advances peace in Ukraine, then the administration has a serious case to make. If the cost is a hollowed-out intelligence community, a January 6th defendant inside the counterterrorism apparatus, an undefended Budapest commitment, and continued Russian oil revenue during an active war, then the case becomes much harder. The committee should make both sides put their numbers on the table. Then the public can decide what kind of policy it is actually buying.